And I'm going to talk about a couple of ways. There are kind of three methods that I use to separate seeds. One is called decanting. I call one called panning for seed, and the other one is winnowing. Okay, so decanting seeds is separating the viable seeds from the unviable seeds in the chaff by using a water method. So instead of kind of talking about it, I filmed a little video, and you'll have to excuse my grubby clothes because I've been in the garden for quite a while already. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this, and you can ask questions about it through your chat if you have any questions. Okay, so here we go. Hold on, technical problems. Just a second. To decant seeds, and that means it's a process that you use with water to separate the chaff of the plant from the seed. And when you're doing it, and I'm going to do a demonstration, you'll see that the viable seeds are heavier and they'll sink down to the bottom of the container, and the seeds that aren't viable will float to the top along with all the chaff. And after the seeds sink, you can scoop out the top and then strain the rest of them, and then you'll have your viable seeds. So over here is some dried collard greens, a whole bunch of them. The collard green plants are ginormous. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some sections of this, and actually I need to separate this because I don't want to mix those seeds up. Okay, so I'm just going to boy, the seeds are actually just falling out, if you can see that. And I'm also just gently squeezing the pods to release the seeds. It's a messy process. A bigger plate would be lovely, or a piece of newspaper would be probably even better. Okay. All right. These plants are pretty actually easy because the chaff that comes out is larger pieces, so a lot of it you could probably just pick out. But if you're going to decant, what you would do, and I'm shaking them, I'm going to take out some of the chaff just because it's easy to do so with these seeds, but I'll leave some of it in. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put this in the water. It takes a little while for the seeds to sink. Oh, some of them sunk right away. Can you see the seeds at the bottom? Okay, that's great. And then there's some seeds at the top. So this is called decanting. So the seeds at the top, it's like when you're doing split peas or dried beans in your kitchen, and you're sorting, you always sort out the ones that float on the top. It's the same concept. So pretty much the ones at the top are not viable, and you're just gonna throw them out. So we can just strain all this stuff out, and then all that stuff at the bottom is all your vital seed, and you would strain it with a fine strainer. And actually you can pour the water off. I'm gonna actually pour it into this bed because I don't want to waste any water. Because the viable seed is heavier, it really just stays at the bottom. So there's your viable seed that we're going to strain over a fine mesh strainer, and then we're going to dry thoroughly because drying is super important. So that's how you decant seeds. So I'm going to show you one more thing that you can do. I got to dry this off because I only brought one plate out here. I call it panning for seeds. So I use a plate, and this is Sweet William from the flower. And so what I'm going to do is put some in the seed and in the plate. And the seed is heavier. So as you kind of shake it, do you see how this is separated now? We have the seed here, and the chaff here. So this is all seed. This is pretty much chaff. That's a good way to get rid of some of the chaff. And another method of getting rid of the chaff is called, I believe it's called winnowing. And it's when you blow lightly or use a fan to lightly get rid of stuff. So that's another way that you can do it. So that's it. That's 3 methods to separate your chaff from your seed.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully you got something out of that. Kind of goofy, but those are great ways to separate for dry seeding method. So some seeds have a coating on them. Tomatoes, melons, cucumbers, they actually have a gel that stops the seed from germinating. And so we do this a little bit different. What we want to do is we want to get rid of that gel and then dry the seeds for next year's germination. So the way we do that is you cut open the fruit and scoop out kind of the jelly, like let's just use tomatoes as an example. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. Just scoop out the tomato seeds that are inside the fruit. And again, this is a fruit that's really beyond eating. It's kind of mushy and it's past its prime. So what you do is you let it ferment, and the fermentation process will remove that, that seed coating. So you take like a glass or a jar of water. If you have city water, you'll want to let that city water sit for at least 24 hours so the chlorine evaporates. If you have well water, you don't have to worry about it. But what you do is you fill your jar or cup, put your seeds in, and you let them sit for 2 to 4 days, and you stir them on a daily basis. And as there's natural bacteria in the air that will start eating that coating because it probably because it has some type of sugar content. And after a few days, you pour off the pulp. If there's anything left, you kind of rub the seeds together and then you dry them very thoroughly. You can dry them using a couple of things. Oh, this is what it would look like when you're doing your wet seed saving. So this is, you just would stir your jar every day for a few days. So drying your seeds is really important. If they're not completely dry, you can get mold, you can get fungus, and it can carry pathogens as well. So you can use paper towels, you can use colanders, like the very fine colanders. You can spread your seeds out. Sometimes I use, do you know the splatter guard that you use when you're frying bacon? Sometimes I use that. I also have a couple of old window screens that I use. I place them on empty planting pots so they're above the ground. As a matter of fact, I'm drying chamomile flowers right now for tea. And so that way the airflow can get above and below. It's a great way, but it's really, really important that they're completely and totally dry. We're very lucky in that our climate is dry, so seeds dry pretty quickly. It's best to dry them not in the direct sun, but in a warm, dry place that has good airflow. So here, I just thought this was so awesome. I have not made this myself, although this could be a honey-do project for either me or my husband. But what they did is they found some just old picture frames at probably a thrift store and added some screening to it. And isn't this, it's so beautiful. I love the way it looks. So this would look great in a, like under a deck where there's some dry breezes coming through. So I thought that was pretty ingenious. So after you've dried your seeds totally, you can store them in different things. I generally store them in small glass jars, like very small. I've collected very small jars. One thing that's really great are old spice jars. And I also, when if I buy like shoes, purses, they have packets in them that are desiccants that will absorb moisture. So if there's any leftover moisture in the seeds, that will help keep them dry. You can also use rice. Rice can also be used as a desiccant to absorb that. You can store them in glass. You can use sealable bags. You can use paper bags. You just want to make sure that when they're stored, they're in a cool, dry, and dark location until they're ready to plant. You can also store them in the freezer. The important thing about when you store them in the freezer is when you take them out, do not open them until, do not open the container until it's come to room temperature, because you'll get condensation inside the container, which will make the seeds moist again. And then you have to re-dry them. So that's, those are some tips. So also, you know, you want to clearly label what the seed is, the date, and all that pertinent information. So if you are curious about, you know, how viable your seeds are, you can just do a couple of tests. My grandma always did this germination test. She took some paper towels and she dampened them, and she put out 10 seeds and put them in a baggie in a warm, kind of indirect sunlight. And after they germinated, she counted, well, after germination was clearly happening, she counted how many had germinated. So if 8 germinated, she had an 80% germination rate. That's just more for your own edification than anything else. When seed sellers, seed houses sell seeds, they have, you know, particular germination rate criteria that they have to meet in order to sell those seeds. And also, people always ask, you know, how long do seeds last? So I'm sure some of you guys are aware of seeds that have been found, like in Egyptian tombs, that have lasted literally thousands of years. Seeds, the germination differs, the rate differs greatly between varieties of seeds, but generally it just decreases over time. So you may not get as good a germination, but you'll still have plants that germinate. So these are just some tips, and we can talk a little bit about these. We already talked about the beans, letting the pods dry on the vine. Cantaloupe, we kind of talked about the membrane of the seed. This one, they talk about rinsing it in gently with your fingers, but these are some ideas. There are some great books we're going to talk about. At the end of this, I've got a bibliography for you. There are so many different plants and varieties. I don't have it all in my head, but when I have questions, I go to my book, and that will tell me pretty much everything I need. I call it the Bible of seed saving. So we'll talk about that. And as I mentioned before, this is kind of some photos of what plants look like when they've gone to seed. So it's all gone to seed. So this is what carrot looks like. It gets quite tall. It can get to probably past 2 feet. This is what radish, the seeds form inside these little pods, kind of like the collard greens do. Arugula does that. There's lots of plants that form these little seed pods. Peas, this is just, you know, you let the peas dry on the vine, and then they're easily saved. Here's another example of lettuce. Lettuce is really pretty. I've got some red lettuce going to seed and flowering right now. And they get little tufts of white, kind of like a dandelion on top. This is what leeks look like. This is actually before the flowers have opened in the seed. There's a little black seed that grows in there. And this is what turnip looks like. And you can see there's some, if you look very carefully, there's some long seed pods that are kind of like the radish pods. Spinach. This reminds me to tell you, when you're decanting, there are certain seeds that have a different type of surface, like spinach is kind of a rough surface, and so are beets. And if you're using that water decanting method to separate your seed from your chaff, it takes a little longer for the seeds to sink because of the surface tension the seed creates on the surface of the water. And you can, spinach kind of has a bumpy seed. This is what beets look like. This is not when they're dry, but getting ready to seed. This is Swiss chard. This long, tall one is Swiss chard. And they're also bumpy. So one thing you can do, and I tried this with some poppies. I haven't harvested them yet because poppies, you know, shatter very easily. It's kind of hard. Some varieties are hard to collect the seeds. You can put a baggie over them and tie it as the plant dries, and then you just clip it off, turn it upside down, shake, give it a good shake, maybe crush it a little bit, and then separate your seeds from your chaff. So that's one way to, for those tricky plants that select, that shatter. So every year, except for this year, of course, the Sonoma County Fairgrounds hosts the National Heirloom Exposition, and they have lots of interesting varieties that you've never seen, and you can get seed there. So next year, hopefully, we'll be back on track, and you can look at maybe it's not too far. A lot of master gardeners have gone, and it's a really awesome event to go to. So, and here is the nonprofit organization I was telling you about that one of its goals is to preserve heirloom seeds. And it's really interesting. The descriptions will sometimes say what country they were brought from. And, you know, back in the day when there were a lot of immigrants coming to the United States, many immigrants brought seeds over. And some of those seeds have been kept in the family for generations over generations. So there's lots and lots of unique plants. You can buy seeds through them. And they also have some webinars, and they have other educational resources. And they have a blog, and they're just helping preserve these heirloom seeds for posterity. So it's a great organization. So I highly suggest that you take a look at that if this is of interest to you. The book that I was telling you that I call the Bible is called Seed to Seed by Susan Ashworth. So she actually came up to Grass Valley to do a talk at the McCourtney, it was then the Grange, when there was a community seed saving event, swap, a seed saving swap. And so she actually is in the Valley, and her book is just amazing. There's a great section in the front of the book that actually talks about, you know, the process of seed saving and all the kind of the biology of it. And then the bulk of the book is references. So, you know, for example, like if you grow cucumbers and maybe you want more than one variety, you know, this is where I learned that Armenian cucumber is a different plant family than your traditional cucumber, so you can grow those side by side and they will not cross-pollinate. So it has all those tips and tips and tricks in the book. It's a wealth of information. It's amazing. Another book that I really like, that the language is a little less scientific, is The Gardener's Guide to Growing and Storing Vegetable and Flower Seeds by Mark Rogers. So that's great. And these are some of the websites that I came across when I was doing this presentation. And again, you can always go back to this and fast forward the recording to get to this part if you want to write those down. So that's pretty much it.